Hello and welcome to another edition of the Full Force News Burst, brought to you by GeneralsJoes.com with me as your host, Chris, don't push me, back, McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. Joining me today to discuss the news that the Snake Eyes movie release has been pushed back to an unknown date in 2020 is Justin, push it, Bell. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this salt and pepper news burst. Earlier today, His Tank reported that word coming from Paramount Pictures states that the G.I. Joe Snake Eyes movie release date has been pushed back from its original March 27th, 2020 spot to an unknown date. The sequel to A Quiet Place has taken that very spot on the schedule, and we are all aware of the speed bumps affecting Sonic the Hedgehog in what is a rather turbulent time at that movie studio. This news was very much expected, and it was only going to be a matter of time that the date changed from the previous March window, especially after director Robert Schwenke decided to switch his focus to his new project, Seneca, on the creation of Earthquakes. Now, Justin,
yes,
this was fully expected. We had discussed this. We had discussed the fact that the March date was going to be difficult to hit before the principal photography postponement and the Schwenke delay. Yes, it's a bit annoying, but do we really need to worry about this?
Oh, I don't think we have to worry about it. I don't think it means that it's not going to get made. I do want to hear you say the director's name like 8 more times. So.
Robert Schwenke.
Yes, there you go. That just does something for me. I don't know why. But does anybody else think it's funny that it's the movie about the ninja who can't talk is being replaced by a movie called The Quiet Place?
I know, that's brilliant, isn't it? I think I've seen a few people put comments like that about.
I'm not the only clever one.
No, you're not the only clever one. Like saying, isn't it the same movie? And I thought that was Snake Eyes. I thought that was the title of the Snake Eyes movie. I mean, do you worry at all that Paramount seems to be a bit flaky in many regards here? Do we really need to discuss Sonic right now? I mean, will we get a blue Snake Eyes with ridiculously long legs and a weird face with exposed human teeth?
I mean, on the one hand, I'm glad that Paramount is taking some of that feedback seriously and is kind of revisiting some of the Sonic stuff. But on the other hand, if you start, setting a precedent that every time, the fandom is unhappy with something, you're going to run back and reshoot and reanimate and all this stuff, I think you're getting yourself in some dangerous territory there. But
although when I saw that, when I saw the
first design, I'm not saying it doesn't need to be done. It most certainly does need to be done. Yes, but yeah, I don't know, but I think we've been saying since day one that, we'll believe it when we see it. And that's what I'm still going to stick with, is we'll believe it when we'll see it. Unfortunately, I think part of me was a little bit more optimistic. And like I said, I don't think this means it doesn't ever get made, but any delay or any kind of shift isn't good. I mean, you would like film productions to proceed seamlessly without interruption and without delay and without hitches, because every little hitch it's a hitch, and it's not a catastrophe at the end of the world. And yes, it happens to lots of movies out there, but you gotta think the smoother the production is, the better.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is though, with these kind of little things, I'm not too worried about it, because I think the date of March 2020 was plucked out of thin air way before we had the principal photography lined up, before Robert Schwenke was involved, before there was anything written. So there was probably like it was a reasonable date to be looking at. But then obviously as time went on and nothing was done, and then they finally got the director, and then he not backed out, but he postponed his involvement for a certain period of time. That has caused a bit of a kind of knock-on effect. And I didn't, to be honest, I think Paramount would have been better. They would have been better to not reveal anything, about that particular aspect of the film until they were until they'd got at least a few of the kind of clear initial things sorted out, like principal photography, like casting, like the full script, or at least like the third or fourth draft of the script done, and the director in place, and so on and so forth. I think once those things are in place, then you can say, okay, well, this is what we've got allotted, and this is what we've got allotted in terms of pre-production. This is what we've got in terms of allotted filming, and this is the time period we've got for post.
Yeah, I mean, it's the eternal conflict. You want to make sure people are informed and interested, and the fandom and others demand to know what's going on as soon as possible. But the earlier you let people know, the more things are subject to change, and then it seems like everything's a train wreck, and so it's I mean, you can look at it both ways.
And 2020 is still being touted and was mentioned at CinemaCon 2019 recently as the year the Snake Eyes movie will be released.
Mm-hmm.
Are you concerned that it will be more like 2021? And even so, could that be a positive? I mean, in order to get the film right, to kind of take enough time over it?
Yeah, I'd rather they not rush it.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd rather we just let it happen in 2021 rather than try to make some artificial release date and end up cutting corners and things like that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not concerned. You're always concerned as a G.I. Joe fan with a live action film.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that it's one of those things where, okay, I'm going to use a sports metaphor. When my team Manchester United are playing, every one of those players has to be at their top game to actually get any kind of result. Because if any one of those players isn't playing well, then they're shit. And in fact, even when they're playing really well, even when they play as well as they can, they're a bit
generally
shit at the moment. Yeah, at the moment they are. And it's the kind of thing here is like everything needs to be at like the peak, like top. The director has to be on top of his game. The cast, whoever's doing the casting, has to be on top of their game. Whoever they actually get, the actors have to be on top of their game. Like every element of this, for this to be any good, everyone has to be pulling out their best, and I can't see that happening really in general. So you kind of then hope for, well, let's hope we get something passable or acceptable or just good enough that I'm not like disappointed by the end of it. And do you think they'll learn from the mistakes they've made, or do you think we're going to see a similar kind of thing, an improvement on Retaliation? Or I mean, what are your honest opinion? What do you think is going to happen?
If you want me to be totally and brutally honest, I don't have a great feeling for it. I mean, it's I'd like to think that, well, what they did with Bumblebee was a good thing. They kind of salvaged the Transformers franchise in a way, and they did some cool things that kind of turned that around a little bit, so, and I believe that. Yeah. That being said, do I think it's guaranteed that they're going to do the same thing for Snake Eyes? I don't, because, I don't have a whole lot of confidence that Hasbro themselves even knows what they want or who they want Snake Eyes to be. Yeah. If Hasbro themselves doesn't know who they want Snake Eyes to be, how the hell are they going to express that to Paramount, who they want Snake Eyes to be? Yeah. I just think, G.I. Joe is one of those properties where you can't be all things to all people, and where you can, in a movie like Bumblebee, make it appeal to a modern audience while still having some cool vintage throwbacks. G.I. Joe, it's much more difficult to do that because, at its core, G.I. Joe has generally been a military-oriented franchise, which is really tough to sanitize for a new audience without dramatically changing it. Yeah. And of course, any dramatic changes you make is going to, it's going to alienate the older crowd. And, so you're stuck in a little bit of a no-win situation, and almost feel like by Hasbro continuing to try to milk the franchise and reinvigorate it, you're only further diluting it, and I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing. I really want them to take it seriously, take a hard look at. I mean, back in the 90s, and I've used this metaphor before, and I will probably use it many times again. Transformers, everybody points to the Michael Bay films as being the time that Transformers kind of came back to public consciousness. That's not true. In the 90s, Transformers completely reinvented itself and became Beast Wars. Yeah. Prior, in the 5 to 10 years prior to Beast Wars, Transformers was a non-issue at retail. Nobody cared about it. Nobody knew anything about it. It completely and totally tore it down and rebuilt it as an entirely new thing. And guess what? It regained some measure of popularity and started rising back up and generated more animated series, generated more interest, generated enough interest that it finally became a Hollywood franchise. But it was that transformation to Beast Wars that kicked that all off. And the G.I. Joe fans don't want to see that happen to G.I. Joe, but the truth is that's gonna have to be what happens in order for G.I. Joe to be resurgent again. Yeah. And if you look at Transformers, yes, people had to suffer through 3 or 4 or 5, and I say suffer, with sarcasm, because Beast Wars to me was one of the best eras of Transformers history.
Yeah.
But fans of G1 had to kind of weather that storm for several years, but it ended up being very good for them, because now look at all the potential G1 merchandise and content and stuff that's all out there everywhere. So G.I. Joe fans you're going to have to suck it up, and you're going to have to just let Hasbro do what they're going to do without, keep on trying to cling to this small element of this vintage franchise that is just, I don't know if it's strong enough to sustain a new generation. So, that's kind of, I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I just, having, the Snake Eyes movie calling back so much to what Snake Eyes has always been, I just don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. And I know that veers away from the whole movie being delayed talk, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it matters whether the movie comes out in 2020 or 2021. If Hasbro doesn't have a very good idea of what they want to do with the franchise going forward, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. It's either going to be Snake Eyes comes and fails in 2020, or comes and fails in 2021, or comes and is a moderate success to allow a few more toys to come out and G.I. Joe to kind of linger on for a few more years. But something's gotta change, and at this point G.I. Joe is kind of in this forever limbo middle ground that just can't seem to get past its vintage roots, but can't seem to find enough people at Hasbro who care enough about it to totally rethink it and invest some time and money in rethinking it. And so it just is caught forever in limbo.
I think that's a good point you mentioned, taking it seriously, and I think that's one of the problems that it has. And well said, Justin. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Finally, will the Snake Eyes water slide be delayed on Hasbro's water park opening day?
That's the biggest news. I don't care about the movie. I just want the water slide.
Anyway, Justin, thanks for jumping on and chatting with me about this pushed, delayed, whatever you want to call it, release date delay. Yet another speed bump, but to be honest, we all knew this was going to happen. This was
a surprise to anybody.
I think people are reacting like in a oh my god, this is the end of the world, but at the same time. Wow. This has been on the cards. We knew this was going to happen. We knew the delay was going to happen. We've been talking about it, constantly since, the Snake Eyes movie. Information has started creeping through.
We've been talking about what a train wreck the next G.I. Joe movie was going to be since G.I. Joe Retaliation in 2013. This is old news.
Since Rise of Cobra.
That too, yeah.
Anyway, Justin, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Sure, my pleasure.
Hasbro, Paramount, and G.I. Joe correspondent Justin Bell. That's it for this instalment of the Full Force News Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host Justin Bell. See you next time, and as always, full delays all the time, Force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback or questions. We have also started a Patreon page, so if you want to see your name up in lights on these videos or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/TheFullForce podcast, or click the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.